first thought when you said, what have people been doing? I was tempted to say just trying to survive. We've now got a situation whereby doing the right thing, if I can put it in inverted commas, is not just a question of whether you feel it's the right thing. It's also good business sense, which means that we're getting quite a few members who, if I'm honest, are probably not totally sold on sustainable tourism, but they're beginning to see it is worth their while getting involved. Just before I stop, one big thing that we've done at ATO is it started as a discussion in the bar after one of the sessions at our overseas conferences in 2019. And that was the idea of putting together a think tank, which, surprisingly enough, the next day when everybody had recovered from their glasses of Malbec, it still seemed to be a good idea. And it's now become the ATO Climate Crisis Think Tank, or ACT for short. We didn't do much with it at all in 2020. People were too busy firefighting. But now this is coming together, and we've got, if you like, something of a structure with two committees, the ST committee, which is looking at the micro approach, helping members in terms of ST actions by producing a series of toolkits. And then the ACT, the think tank, which is looking at the macro issues, aviation, in a government, that sort of thing. So this would probably never have got off the ground if it hadn't been for COVID. So that's been an interesting move forward. If I could split the market into two, you've got the mass market mainstream holidays, which consists of getting on a plane, going to a beach in Spain somewhere, sunbathing and coming home. I think it's a whole difficult job to convince those people what we're talking about.
Do you think there's a desire there for everybody to work together to make sure that we can kind of start hitting these targets?
I don't think there's enough cooperation as we would like, but that's understandable. We're at the start of this journey. We're at the bottom of the mountain, if you like, and we've got to climb it. And I think it's pretty obvious to all the people who are interested in this topic that we have to work together. I think it'll take a little time, but that's the inevitable route, I think. Mm-hmm. So I'm not too disturbed that at the moment there isn't a lot of cohesion, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I probably have a more positive view than that, because my sense is, over the last decade, we have seen huge collaboration within the aviation sector. So right from 2009, when the aviation sector came together to jointly commit to our 2050 long-term targets and our interim target of carbon neutral growth from 2020. So we've had that decade of collaboration already within the aviation sector. And as you mentioned, the Sustainable Aviation Coalition and others, and our One World Alliance, for example, lots of great work that's happened together that we couldn't have done individually. I think where we need to go now is kind of cross-sector collaboration, and that's where things like Jet Zero Council starts to be effective, but also the opportunity that comes with the COP climate conference this year is trying to look at how we can cross-finance, how we can use sectors like aviation that are complex to decarbonize, that we can help fund carbon reductions elsewhere while we scale up our solutions. And those really do need kind of government support and global scale solutions. So, back to ICAO and trying to get global kind of commitment around a long-term goal for aviation towards net zero would be really helpful too.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because it seems like in some ways the industry is sort of pushing things forward in this regard rather than the government necessarily. Do you think that's the right way around? I suppose obviously you guys will perhaps would favour, being able to sort of lead the conversation rather than necessarily having things imposed by the government. But it's quite an interesting kind of looking at how we're gonna move forward in that way. Claire, I think you guys work with sustainable aviation as well, but also the government on other topics.
I think from sort of the travel industry perspective, when it comes to kind of decarbonising aviation, and this was why we're a member of Sustainable Aviation, because I think it is important that we kind of speak in one voice to some extent to government, because I think, when we know that government support is needed for the transition, and so I think it's very helpful when we can articulate clearly what the asks are of government. And where we think the opportunities are. So that's why from ABTA perspective, we've joined sustainable aviation, but recognizing that within the broader travel and tourism industry, there's other decarbonisation issues as well. So we set all of this out in our Tourism for Good report, but we need to look at decarbonisation in cruise, in hotels, in ground transport. You know, we need to look at the whole travel journey. But yes, so as we talked about, that cross-sector collaboration, but I think that shared articulation of what the opportunity is, I think is key.
Mm-hmm.
I would just say when I was talking about, you know, we just at the start of people collaborating, that wasn't, Carrie, a suggestion that the aviation side is not working together. It's more this cross-sector thing that I was referring to, which, you know, which I think is starting. So we've got a good way to go.
Do you think the Jet Zero Council, perhaps though, obviously I think that focuses on perhaps airports and airlines, but I suppose Derek and Claire, do you have a view on how the whole, you know, the wider chain, including these sort of SMEs, can kind of all be talking about this in one forum? I don't know if there's scope, or whether, you know, some kind of, there is already a forum for that. I don't know, does ABTA facilitate anything like that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. One of the things we try to do with Tourism for Good is kind of look at decarbonisation across the whole of travel and tourism and bring to life what it means. So within our membership, we have so many different business models. We have, you know, agents, or, you know, people that, particularly with home working, it's actually very hard to say, well, what are the emissions that they are responsible for? Because it's somewhat, you know, it's people in their own bedrooms. To, you know, the big tour operators that have their own cruise ships, that have their own planes. So we've got a huge range of business models. So what it looks like in practice will be different dependent on that business model. But I think amongst our membership and amongst that travel industry, we can certainly play a role in sort of painting what that picture can look like, what we're aiming for, and how we can learn from each other.
I know that Boris Johnson is keen for us to create an emission-free transatlantic aircraft. So you think that is possible in the future, but perhaps it'll be as part of a bit of a mix. It might include a little bit of offsetting and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, the Fly Zero program is focused on an actual, you know, zero emission aircraft. Yeah, personally, I really want to see that happen. It's like my personal goal. I want to see that happen before I retire. So yeah, I really hope everyone gets behind it.